Got Kayla out there. And somebody named Forging Beyond the Belief, whoever that is. So we had some fun. We had a fun week. We talked about why Christians can't encounter God yesterday. And then Sunday, we talked about 3-dot theology. Anybody have any comments on any of that content, or just anything else you want to bring up or ask or comment about, or any other topic? I don't know, Nick, would you be willing to kind of go into the 3N thing we were talking about earlier? Because I thought that was pretty interesting.
Okay. So, yeah. The thing is I got it from John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series, and I can't really remember what the specific categories were. So I just kind of like in the middle of the workday was just kind of like spitting stuff out or shooting stuff out. It makes sense to me. However, I don't.
That's all that matters, right?
I get it from him, but maybe Seraphim might be able to chime in and kind of just, direct me. So I'll just kind of shoot for it. And then just let me know. Don't take this as John Vervaeke's words or a representation of him or what he thinks. This is just what I can remember about the thing that we're talking about. That's it. So Kevin's last video, why Christians can't encounter God, was a very powerful video for me. I felt like I didn't feel like it was like shifting the tectonic plates of, the internet or Christianity, but I felt like it was kind of like the opposite, where the plates have already been shifted and a lot of work has been done to build up some kind of a coherent message or a coherent structure or some sort of edifice has been erected through Beyond the Fundamentals. I think the Beyond the Fundamentals articulation of what it sees. I think that video was kind of like the completion of some component, like the roof of this edifice. I think it was like a capstone video of where Beyond the Fundamentals has gone. And I felt like it conglomerated a lot of the other videos, a lot of the other concepts that Kevin's been trying to work through for a couple years now. And this one kind of coalesced those together, and it came out very clear to me, and became very insightful because of the clarity, in the high resolution manner in which he explicated the concepts, and then also used some visuals to kind of help shape the notions that he was trying to get across. So is it okay that I'm being this long-winded?
I don't nobody's stopping you.
Okay.
I did pull up though. I did search Vervaeke's name. I came up with the narrative order, the normative order, and the nomological order.
Nomological. Okay.
Yeah.
I kept saying in the text noumenal because I was thinking more like spiritual, or like breath, pneuma, like that kind of thing.
Right.
So basically, what I saw in Kevin's video was a concise, clear, and distinct analysis of the way in which modern people, and when I say modern, I mean people like after Christ, after Christ, therefore like the Christian world, I guess you could say, the Christianized world ought to grow, and the manner in which they ought to be oriented, and the type of patterns that they can expect to see from an architectural standpoint, in their growth, and development as a wiser, and I guess you could just say better Christian, or whatever, however you want to scale that, whatever semantic words you want to use to scale that value structure. When I watched John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, there was a couple videos where he laid out what I thought was the parameters or the criteria that one would need in order to have a coherent and like pragmatic ontology or worldview. And there were three distinct categories that he used in order to say that these three categories need to be in place. Something needs to be these are the three categories basically that will encapsulate a coherent ontology or worldview. And those were, you needed to have some sort of narrative explanation. You needed contents inside of a narrative structure. You needed a normative structure, and you needed a nomological structure. When I talked to Kevin this earlier today, I was replacing the nomological structure for noumenal structure. So I'm going to be mistaken here. So I'm just going to go with what I said rather than what John Vervaeke says, because I can't recall exactly what he meant by nomological.
Well, we can look up let me show a slide if it's all right here.
Yeah, please.
Pulling this right out of one of his lectures off, sometimes they have the things tabbed out. So the nomological order is the fundamental principles by which knowledge and reality cooperate. The normative order, how we can move in an orderly fashion up the levels of reality, consciousness, self, from what is less real to what is more real. And then the normative order tells you how you can be better, how you can create realness, meaning in your own life. This is the narrative order of Christianity, the story about the course of history moving toward a final consummation, the promised land. So coherence, I mean to do that. The more intelligible, the more real things are and fit together, and the more meaningful you find your life. This is the nomological order, significance of how valuable, how good are the elements of your life. This is the normative order. Purpose, does your life have a direction? This is the narrative order. Was that helpful at all to bring that back out?
It's helpful because I'm going to throw it out.
Oh,
it's
good.
helpful because in order to explain what I'm trying to get across, it'll just be more helpful to just forget about what he's saying.
Good.
Okay.
I like this. So there's something trying to get itself out that is perhaps breaking new ground. It's
maybe
not a repetition of something else.
You guys tell me. So let's call this, let's make a bonded triad. Let's say that in order to have a coherent ontology, we're going to make the criteria that we need to have these three things in place. We need to have a narrative structure, a normative structure, and a noumenal structure. So the narrative structure is going to be basically, we need to have some sort of story. We need to have some kind of characters in place, whether they're mythological, whether they're real, whether it doesn't matter. All it is a structure that gives us characters, three types of characters: a hero, a victim, and a villain. And those can be the same person, they can be different people, whatever, it doesn't matter. We need to have a narrative structure. Then we need to have a normative structure, which we're just going to call, and we can debate about the definitions and the semantics of it later. but we're going to have a normative structure, which will be more of like a fact, scientific sort of analytic, bare bones facts about the world. Okay. And then we're going to have
and about reality. Yeah.
Yes. And then we're going to have a noumenal structure, which is going to be more of like the elusive kind of spiritual structure, which is exactly the structure that we kind of can't talk about. It's harder for language to represent. Let's put it that way. So that's where more of our participatory knowing and where it's going to kind of reside, I guess you could say. And so
noumenal might be in this case that which transcends us. Things that are constantly above wherever you are.
So it's kind of like the structure of the things that can't be structured in a way. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So what I saw with Kevin's video was a focus and a great explanation of what is going on inside of the normative structure of Christian growth. What I also, how that overlaid, or what kind of came into my mind when I was watching the video, was that the use of normative metrics like an X and Y axis or a Cartesian coordinate system,
right,
and also a Y or a Z axis, the use of those normative tools also translates into very nicely into the narrative structure of Christianity, which can be, I think, surmised or at least typified in the cross or a crucifixion. And so this noumenal structure that I'm kind of coming up with, I don't have too much to say about, but what I think overlays nicely is if we understand Kevin's video as a very good encapsulation of a normative structure, and then we understand that the narrative structure that maps perfectly in this bonded triad is how we understand the cross, how we understand what it means to be crucified. And so what it would mean to be crucified in the narrative understanding, holding Kevin's articulation of the normative structure of Christian growth, what you would see is that being crucified has this sort of it's like a narrative representation of that normative order of a horizontal, it's physically a narrative representation of the normative structure that Kevin was explicating. So you have a horizontal plane of the character, of the body shape. You have a vertical, on the cross, and then you have language in the Bible, which is that I think it's Psalm chapter 21, 22, where David is talking about being pierced, right? And we know that Christ was pierced with a spear. We have kind of like these, we use this penetrating language, which is all language in the narrative structure, in the narrative order. It's all language that is along the Z-axis, which is to know thyself. Inward, and the degree to which you can know thyself, the degree to which you can be crucified, is the degree to which all of those axes in the normative structure are going to function. So you see how in the normative language, Kevin was saying the degree to which you can know yourself is going to be directly proportional to the degree to which you can know God in a vertical and others in a horizontal. The way to say that in a narrative form is the degree to which you know how to be crucified is going to be directly proportional to to those axes, right? So how you can be penetrated or open or wounded in some way.
So perhaps like if I were to combine the narrative with the structure there, you would have this cycle of life, death, resurrection. And in that cycle, as you relate to others, they will pierce you, they will crucify. So there's a crucifixion in your outward relating to people that are adjacent to you on the dianoia.
Right.
One of the things that they do for you is they pierce you.
Right.
They bring about failures in your life. They bring about suffering and costliness.
Yes.
They literally pierce you and crucify you.
Yes.
So you have the same structure. So you have a narrative structure that replicates the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ in your dealings with other people.
Right. You have a narrative structure. What the basic, if I could summarize, all I want to say is that you have Christianity comes packed with the ultimate narrative structure of the normative structure that I think that Kevin made a lot of ground in that particular video. So that's basically really all I'm saying. I'm enjoying overlapping all of the narrative language, all of the narrative themes, all of the narrative patterns in the Bible onto the normative structure that Kevin was explicating. And what I think might happen is if I could start to develop and spend some time and maybe think about what a noumenal structure might look like, or maybe I could throw that out the window. But the point is that if there is some kind of noumenal structure, then how that might overlay with the other two, and maybe give a whole very well-rounded account that comes also packed with inference on like what you ought to do, what you should do. It kind of comes jam-packed with its own, software system of procedural knowing, like it'll kind of infer things to you. Then that would be kind of a cool thing, I guess.
I have a question for you, Nick.
Yeah. Well, before we get into yours, Doug, I just want to say that I think we've thrown the words structure and normative around so much that some people's heads are swimming.
Yeah.
So, let's go to Doug, and then let's try to see if we can help this land a little bit better. Because anyway, Doug.
I might be able to help, but I might be way off the mark too, because I haven't listened to the video. So I may be in some other framework of knowledge that isn't really a part of this. When I think of narrative, I think of the stories in our life that exhibit truth, that create emotion, that create intellectual curiosity, they create conclusions. But they're the stories in Scripture that God wants us to hear. They are a narrative, much as each of us have a narrative in our lives. And when I think of normative, I think about those things that become essentially practical in a community. They become the way to live. They're embraced as truth. And when I was listening to you talk about the noumenal, and you probably have an answer to this, Nick, I didn't know what word was coming up there, but I immediately went to Immanuel Kant and his idea that the phenomenal is all we can embrace, but we can't really know reality. The noumenal is sort of behind the scenes. Therefore, we're ignorant of what is really true.
Yes.
So the narrative is really the storyline that captures our attention and allows us to think what has been and what might be or what might be in our life. The normative for me would be, again, how do I live it out? What's essentially normative that nobody can, it's all of our responsibility to live out these normative principles. And the pneuma is the fact that it binds it all together because it means I can understand what is true.
Yes.
God's given us that. Am I in the zone?
That's totally in the zone. Totally in the zone for me. I was thinking of Kant myself when I was using the term noumenal, which we can't for him, there's the phenomenal world, which we can talk about, we can do things about, and then there's the noumenal world, which we really can't, we don't have access to do in his program. And that's why I said it's the structure of things that are unstructured, right? So that's spot on for me. How it all coheres together, I'm not really sure. I've been thinking about this for literally like 3 minutes. So I'm kind of shooting from the hip here. But yeah,
I think if we start with the noumenal, we are somewhat captivated by the fact that we can understand transcendent things. We can understand the beyond. We can understand that God has even the power to illuminate our minds, which makes to me, the narrative and the normative valuable and otherwise wouldn't be. So it's almost my starting point. In a way.
Yeah, like the foundation for that's helpful. I think we should address what Kevin was saying, that kind of slow down a little bit and maybe start talking about some of the terms and everything, or we could just talk about something completely different.
Well, yeah, when you talk about a normative structure, like in a society, there's certain things you're expected to do. You're going to go to school. You're going to then go to college. You're going to get a job. You're probably going to meet somebody and get married. You're going to buy a car. You're going to buy a house. You're going to work for a certain amount of time. Eventually, you're probably going to retire. Maybe one day some people die. So maybe that's coming. Things like that, where there's an expectation that's considered the normative structure of a person in a society.
Well, yeah. So the normative structure is almost is basically the rubric by which the narrative structure has place to put in specifics of characters and color and stuff like that. It's not normative, right?
So then each domain is going to have its own normative structure. Like if you want to be a Catholic priest, there's certain kinds of training and schools you need to go to, certain kind of behaviors that are expected of you. If you want to be a Southern Baptist pastor, or if you want to be a professor, see, there's a line of progression toward a particular thing. If you want to become a military officer, and oftentimes you don't know what the quality of being that thing is until you get there. So the problem of church is that it's not, and I'm not saying this is anybody's fault, okay? It's not like people are evil and this is why we have this, but whatever is most real is by definition, it transcends all of us. So there is no way to bring it into graspability for everyone, or maybe anyone, but nonetheless, we're going to build institutions and structures where we are attempting to help each other get there. And it's going to have normative features to it, which will necessarily mismatch. They will be a mismatch for the growth milestones that you actually need in order to interface with what is most real. So it's both a container and a place to grow, and it's also something that you need to transcend that structure also, or you can't grow. And because that's the nature of it, it's a difficult problem, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And it's no easy solution to it. Kyle.
Yeah. Couple of things. Curious if it seems like the narrative would change what's normative over time, as more stories told, more people hear it, more impressions are made. The trend of whatever feeling is evoked by the collective transform the normative via
Mhm.
the narrative. Does that, am I tracking?
Yeah, I think that would necessarily both be reciprocal to each other.
Yeah. Okay. And then a point that you guys tell me if this rings true. Seems like there's maybe two, there's probably more, but two clear in my mind dispositions or stances, if you will, to the narrative. And one might be kind of pridefully comprehension. So thinking that they can understand it, thinking that if they do enough work, they'll know it fully. So they'll be able to be the container of all of what's able to be known. So they comprehend it. And then the second stance would be more of just an attempt to appreciate. The humble posture would just be to acknowledge being in interaction mode, being welcome in that space, and being appreciative just of the opportunity, and try to take in as much as is possible at any given moment, knowing you'll never fully get it all. Just being in a appreciative stance. I'm curious if we were to push narrative and kind of try and transform the normative towards appreciation, if we'd have a lot more curious people, if we'd have a lot more humble people, if we'd have a lot more transformation in our world, as opposed to a bunch of people who are trying to just regurgitate the facts of the matter, and I'm right, you're wrong kind of stance. Let everybody kind of mingle on that.
Well, there was I listened to Christopher Master Pietro and Guy Sengstock talk today about circling and dialogos, and he said it's something that you don't take seriously and you very much do take seriously. And what he meant by that is, like, when you're in an actual session of dialogos with somebody, you take it very seriously. You're very engaged, you're very involved, you're very attentive, you're very participatory. And it's almost like a dance. Okay. So when you dance, or when I play a piece of music, the dance is the point. It's not like we're racing to see who can get to the end or something like that. It's not like we're playing, if we were playing music to see who could get to the end the fastest, then the fastest musicians would be the best. But it's not about that. There's a feeling that needs to be conveyed. And so there's something to enjoy. Like you enjoy sipping on a cup of coffee until it's gone. It's not just about having it in you. It's about enjoying. So you go through this process of dealing with propositions, ideas, facts, proposals, and it is very serious. But at the end of it, doing it was the point. It was an end to itself. And when it's finished, you don't take all the conclusions with you and hold on to them. You actually just forget the content, and you allow the process that you just participated in to have a resonating impact on you moving forward. Something like that.
Would you agree that the word appreciate is more participatory and comprehension is more propositional? Does it stand out like that to you as it does me?
When you call attention to it like that, yes.
Okay. So maybe I'm biasing. Sorry. It's just, that's how it, whatever about it, the frequency that I'm picking up, it feels like. So
when you say appreciate, it's almost like, let's build this thing up. Let's work together to, like, whatever this hum is that's trying to happen, let's both, like a house appreciates in value. Let's make this thing bigger or something, something like that.
Actually, no. appreciate in the sense of riding the wave.
Okay.
Knowing the wave is there, embracing it and letting it take you where it is going to take you.
So I'm thinking two things, like, okay, ride the wave is one thing, like this thing is happening, but I'm also thinking of something that's in a container that's trying to get out. Like a few minutes ago, Nick was trying to convey a thought, and I see it as our job to try to help hatch that baby, to help hatch that baby chick, to induce it out of him, whatever is trying to be said. And so there is that component, whereas the process itself is a wave that you ride and enjoy and appreciate, I guess.
Maybe there's a third point that I just hasn't revealed itself yet. So comprehend, appreciate, and something else is just waiting.
Doug, are you saying? I see Doug talking, but I don't hear you.
I was on mute.
And then we'll go to Susan after this.
I think what I might add to that, Kyle, maybe this is not where you were going, but I think, when you talk about sort of intellectualism and propositional truth, there's no way to love anybody in that. If you walk around in appreciation, it opens a gateway to love and to be exemplifying the fruits of the Spirit, to be exemplifying love. So appreciation is a much more relational idea for me, and a much greater exposition of who God is to the world than just talking about him. So I don't know if you're kind of going there or not.
Yeah, like that is a good.
Yeah.
I think Susan's been waiting. No.
Oh,
Susan,
hi.
do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, hello. No, since
welcome aboard, by the way.
Pardon me? Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Oh, am I muted? No, okay.
No, you're good. We can hear you.
No, since I raised my hand, I kind of see maybe where the conversations go, because Nick, like you said, kind of threw me off. I wasn't quite sure what the nominal normal, but we're talking about now church relationships, basically, correct? Like in the relating of, because you brought in this appreciation idea versus just sharing like propositional types of things with, that's
Right.
what we're kind of learning how to just counter that with relational type of activities, correct? And that's where appreciation comes in. I'm sorry, I'm the newbie. I'm just trying to figure out where does this come from your video that you were talking about, the why we don't get anything from church, or I was
so we were talking about, well, we had started off talking about the why Christians can't interface with God.
Okay.
But Kyle's point about appreciation seemed like it was more relational. And the way I understand appreciation, what Doug did by bringing love into it was an appreciation of what Kyle said to me. Does that make sense? It's like, it's like an appreciation which also amplifies and clarifies.
Okay, right.
Is one of the functions of appreciation, I think.
Okay. I think I'm kind of coming, again, I'm just coming in where you've had a conversation. I'm just trying to figure out what we're actually talking about. So,
well, if it makes you feel any better, we're all trying to figure out what we're talking about.
So Susan,
nobody knows.
Yeah, I didn't watch the video. I watched the 3D with the 3 points of
3-dot theology.
3-dot theology. Yeah. I saw that one and a couple others, but I don't think I've seen the one that you're referencing in this conversation. So
when FSI started, Susan, we used to have it like fairly structured, where we would have to, kind of watch a video, and then there would be a video B, which would be A and B, where we would bring in, content related questions to interact with Kevin.
Okay.
And this was years ago. And it started off pretty structured, like one person went at a time.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like very, very, very small baby steps. Right. And so like myself, for example, being one of those people participating in that, I've gotten to experience this group or whatever this thing is grow to a
Right.
point where we were learning how to play guitar like we would have to play an A chord with one index finger over and over and over again, and we've gotten to a point now where we can kind of just jazz,
Yeah.
kind of just shoot from the hip for the most part. So to be a new participant in
Yes.
this, I actually would like to maybe towards the end of the video get your take on what it would be like to just jump into whatever we're doing now, because like Kevin just said, we don't actually really even know what we're doing right now, which
Right.
I think a lot of jazz players or jazz musicians might feel like when they assemble is I
Right.
don't really know what it's gonna sound like or what's gonna
Yeah.
happen or where the content or flow of the music's gonna go.
Right.
But to be a person who is just kind of thrown into that vast ocean, I'd kind of appreciate your
I'm kind of a jumper inner there kind of person. So I
Yeah,
thought,
perfect.
well, I'm just gonna go ahead and ask the stupid question. Of course, there aren't any stupid questions, right? So, but
Well, there hadn't been any from you, but you should see the comment section
And
on
then
the YouTube channel.
being the only female here, that makes it a little, no, it's fine. I'm enjoying it. I like cerebral kind of talk, which it seems a little bit more, but it's good. Kevin's videos are, that's where I came on board by watching his videos, and I really enjoyed them a lot. We've had a few little back and forths and things, but I think we worked it out, so I'm good,
Yeah, we just chatted on the phone earlier today. That was fun, by the way. I enjoyed it. I
Yeah,
wish we
it
could have
was.
gone longer, but I had that work call that I had to do.
He's a busy man. I had a day off, so
So I want to bring in, I want to go to Vinny in a second, but I want to bring in some ideas. Like you mentioned the 3-dot video, and we're talking about
Yeah.
this other stuff. It's kind of different domains of inquiry,
Yeah.
but speaking of normative structure, if you go to a church, what is normative of the in group is adherence to a set of beliefs. For this group, we try to abide by something we call Rule Omega.
yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So that's kind of it's almost like if you like Nick, if you think back to how you were talking about how we all started, like Rule Omega is kind of hard to do with other Christians when you've never done it before, because we're so moralistically attached to certain propositions that getting any distance from them at all is scary to everybody. And so we have had people in the group kind of get ideological, and we try to address that as we go. And
Kevin
the group
addresses that.
Yeah, that's just the default. That's just the default way we think, is to go to
right.
an ideology, right?
So right. So if I'm a pastor and I'm a 3-dot theology pastor or a Calvinist pastor, when I approach a congregation, my goal is to see all of these people be persuaded to affirm that theology.
Right.
See, that's my goal. If I'm that, or if I'm a dispensational, same thing. What we're doing here, though, what I'm thinking is that and this is for each one of us, if we each have certain kind of tools in our kit bag, things that help us think, what I hope, my goal to come to this assembly is actually to see in each one of you, see a blooming bud of the cosmos that has never been seen before and will never be seen again in this moment, in these faces right here, and to be
Yes.
edified from that. And I expect to actually, I'm not expecting to program anybody to think like I do. I'm expecting to hear ideas and insights that can help me.
Right.
And the same would be for each participant. So it's not like we have a pre-chosen end state of cognitive compliance that we're aiming for, like a typical church would.
Yeah.
So that,
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the actual value structure of the modern church hierarchical structure
Right.
is kind of obliterated with an Ephesians 4 edification model, because I'm thinking to once you had kind of relayed to us that this was your first time participating with FSI, your value, like within the structure of whatever the hierarchy is here, your value is not necessarily even more or less, but there is a distinct value to the perspective that you are now bringing, which I was trying to educe out of you at the end of the video, because it's like you are very, very, very valuable to me, because I've been in this structure for a while, and now there's an opportunity for me to see whatever that structure is
through your eyes
for the first time.
Right.
That is so valuable. So that's what I think, part and parcel of what Kevin is relaying here is that in a normal church structure, if you're the new person, you're trying to find how you fit into that hierarchy, and you definitely know that you're not going to be as valuable as, say, the pastor.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You're not as valuable as the pastor. But in a structure like this, in an Ephesians 4 edification model, your whatever value you do have is not of a typical hierarchical nature.
Right.
You're like a new
because
camera in a security system. It's
It's-
your presence makes the whole system more robust.
Well, what you're saying, Nick, and that's the way the early church was. There was no hierarchy. That came later with the clergy laity kind of thing, when Constantine got things rolling. But in the early church, it wasn't like, there was no hierarchy. Even if you were one of the fivefold ministry, you still, it was a lateral position. It wasn't a hierarchical position. You were, that was just your role as one of the, if you were apostle, prophet, pastor, you were just, you were intertwined with the Christians.
And that seems to be the, like exactly what Paul's getting at in verse 16 of that same passage, is that peer-to-peer edification structure.
Right.
So we've had, Vinny's had his hand up for about 1.5 years.
Sorry, Vinny.
It's okay.
And then we got
We're waiting to hear from you.
Yeah. So yeah, I actually I have some clarifying questions I need to ask about the Why Christians Can't Encounter God video. So Kevin, when you gave the screen with all the know thyself scripture passages, you said so there's still moralistically minded people here who won't believe you until you provide a scripture verse. So so what exactly does that mean? Are you saying that that there are people who are still trapped in this box of like, oh man, well, that idea, if it isn't plainly written down in the Bible, then you're clearly some idiot that wants to, whatever, like they kind of like virtue signaling you? Is that what you mean?
Okay, so if I were to say know thyself, let me see. I don't want to leave anybody out, but pretty sure that Kyle, Nick, Doug, and Seraphim and John would have no problem with that whatsoever. And I'm pretty, no problem. It's a self-evident thing that needs to happen that I don't need to explain. That makes sense? And not that I'm like leaving out Dan or James or anybody on purpose, but I'm just an idea. Like there's certain people who speak often enough in this forum to where I know where they're coming from. If I say it's important to know yourself, and that they're just going to take it for granted. Yes, you need to know yourself. I don't need to explain that. There are other people who the phrase know thyself. So there's something that goes on in Christianity that's basically branding. And so if something was made popular by, say, Socrates, then that's branded as paganism and philosophy, and worse yet, pagan philosophy. So when I say know thyself, something in the person's head automatically maps to pagan philosophy. And this guy's bringing pagan philosophy into the church. That's where their mind goes. They're programmed for their mind to go there immediately. And so also when people have an external locus of authority, they've recognized an authority, like a Baptist would say, I have scriptural authority. A Catholic would need to have some kind of ordained person verify that scripture and or tradition and or magisterium validates whatever concepts being put forth. And then that would make them comfortable that the official authority has validated this. And so it's probably very egoic of me for me to word things like I did for people who are still moralistically minded in stage 3. I really have, I don't want to, it's not like that's profanity, but I am egoically profane when I'm doing that, and I know it, and I can't stop, and that's one of my weaknesses. I know I shouldn't do that.
Okay,
That's your faults towards one another.
See,
so there's these people that like they're not going to consider anything until you show them a scripture for it, and I know those people are in the audience. So even like if my audience was Nick and Seraphim, not that they don't believe the Bible, but I wouldn't have to bother with it if that was my audience. But because given the audience, I need to appeal to their external authority.
It's
okay.
Real quick. It's also folks that rule Omega basically falls on deaf ears.
Yes,
they just can't.
That's a good point.
They just can't cooperate in that fashion. They are rivalrous at the core.
They can't conceptualize that there's something good that's trying to come through. If they're not familiar with it already, it's by default bad. They're like a router in a network system that only whitelists things. If y'all know what that means, like imagine a router that turns everything away until it has specifically been whitelisted. And then that's the only thing that it lets in. Well, everything you say, nothing is whitelisted for like a stage 3 fundamentalist. So you have to get through their whitelist security system by appealing to their authority.
And the shame of that analogy is that it's the Bible. Fundamentalists are using the very sacred scripture to develop that whitelisting software, or that whitelisting filter.
It's like a gatekeeper.
Yeah, they're using the physical words, the black and white words of the Bible to develop and program people to act like that. It becomes the filter, which is insanely profane.
It's also a placeholder. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Nick.
Go ahead. My bad.
No, it's also like a placeholder for a lot of effort that I don't want to put forth. So a few minutes ago, I think Doug mentioned an author that I haven't read. And there is a temptation there to be like, if there's an author I haven't read, I don't want to have to add that to my reading list. So it's a lot easier just to say that he's resorting to philosophy and to discount him rather than to realize there's a whole other area of information that I might benefit from.
Oh, yeah. There was a point in my spiritual walk when I first got saved where people who believed in reincarnation, I would just be like, no, that's just that's stupid, and that it was easier for me to just say that instead of like, I think that's exactly the type of thing you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, I feel like we cut you off a couple times. So go ahead.
Oh, yeah, no, and well, what you guys were saying about the debate and stuff, that's actually segueing into my second question. So does the Bible actually say that all debating is bad? Because for me, I see debate as an art form that cultivates, that should be seeking to cultivate a deeper understanding.
So we could really get into a semantic thing here. You see?
Good.
Yep.
So the word, and I don't, if you want to label something debate, I think that there can be things that are labeled debate that can be good.
Mhm.
So the word debate shows up in Romans 1:29, and it does
Mhm.
not have good bedfellows there. Murder, envy, debate, deceit, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are different Greek words used for disputing and persuading. When you dig into them, they sound more like dialogue and clarifying. I watched a debate about a month ago with Donald Hoffman and two other scientists. It was called a debate, but each person there, like Donald Hoffman, he has a theory of consciousness, and he overtly states that he wants to be proven wrong, because every time a theory is proven wrong, science advances, because now we know that that's not worth our study anymore. Let's go study something else. So he actually wants to be proven wrong. So as he is debating this other person, they're both putting stuff out, but nobody is rivalrous and trying to win. They're actually trying to fortify the other person's position enough so that if their position is wrong, they can help them make that point, because that's how you make progress. If you can debate like that, that would be great. I don't think that calling something debate necessarily makes it bad, but when you have things, let's say there's a type of interaction that is rivalrous, that bolsters attachment, that causes identity, that causes you to go into fight or flight, that causes you to operate in fear, and that is 99% propositional. If there's a way to interact like that, that does all those things, that is pathological and toxic to your development, and you don't want to do that. And most of what gets called debate today, that is what happens there. Those cluster of things happen as a result of debate.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
So maybe we could take the word debate away and think of that cluster of things that is just not helpful for us. It just so happens that they all get clustered together in a rivalrous debating environment.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, I think, is next. We got like 5 hands up.
Okay. Well, thank you. This is maybe a different video, at least, but the 3-dot Calvinism of theology. There's a question that popped into my head. Why? I mean, why? What's the motive? Why Calvinists would try to convert people to Calvinism, or debate a non-Calvinist and put the debate on YouTube, or write a book arguing for Calvinism. What's the motivation? Why try to turn a church Calvinist, for example? So that's it.
I think Roberta asked that question more or less, and I can't remember if she texted it to me or if it was in the Discord. I almost forgot what it was called. And other people could probably comment better on this, but the thing that pops into my head, this is kind of moralistic, but the thing that pops into my head is, I think it's Galatians 6:13, where it says glory in their flesh. Like, when I go to independent Baptist churches, the pastors are proud of how many women have sworn off wearing pants, and of how many people don't have TVs in their house, and of how many people have been converted to be King James only. They're proud of these things. They're like, look at what I have accomplished. I have persuaded and convinced all these people to think that this is true and to behave in this way. And to me, and I think there's a psychological component to that, to be proud of gaining new territory. It's almost like a womanizer putting notches in their belt. They're just trying to get new conquests of more and more people. And you could look at it like the egregore wants to occupy people as its soil, as its territory, and the more it gets, the more proud they are. Just like it feels good to get kills in a video game. Let's get these things. Does that make sense, Joe? You want to say anything else about that, or anybody else want to say anything about that?
I want to add something to it, because I think there's also a number of layers to that thing. One of them, I believe, is it's similar to scientism to me, and having a theory of everything. When you're a Calvinist, you have a theory of everything. There's no discussion any longer.
Right.
And somebody who knows everything taps into their own narcissism without calling them a narcissist. It taps into their own pride. It taps into their own power over. It's a power over, because now I know everything. And you can point to any verse in the Bible, anything God has done, anything any character has done in the Bible, and I'll tell you why it happened.
Mm-hmm.
It's so simple. It's ridiculous, but it is God determining everything ultimately. So I look at it that way too, in addition to what you're sharing there, Kevin.
Doug, do you mind if I riff on what you just said? So I wrote in the chat something about welcoming challenge is quite different than being seen victorious. I think these folks need and they enjoy being seen victorious. And then they start blending this concept of, if God be for me, who can be against me? And as soon as you, so I'm doing these things, I'm getting people to only wear dresses and throw out their TVs, just like you said, Kevin. And this is victory. And so if they're gaining ground, they're taking territory for God in their view, right? God, they're God's champion. And then as soon as somebody comes and says, man, there's a whole world you're not even considering. And
imagine feeling righteous and moralistic,
right?
Righteous and moral for bolstering your own narcissism.
Right.
What a trap that is.
Well, and then immediately they're gonna label you the son of the devil for coming against God's champion. This is how they're seeing things. So hopefully that helps.
I like that. That's good.
So I had some thoughts too on that. I wanted to see what other people have to say, but I could share some of the things I had thought about the motivation for trying to spread Calvinism.
Yeah, you brought this up, so
okay.
By all means.
Well, one is abdication of responsibility. Instead of saying the devil made me do it, you could say that God made you do it, and also you can, you don't if you didn't pray or you didn't do something you were supposed to do, well, God ordained it, so it's in that sense you couldn't have done any better. So you're not really. It's a psychological thing. And there's another one, misguided desire to glorify God. I thought, God has to be all powerful and control it, micromanage everything. And peer pressure, if you're in a group, so obviously all of these would not apply to everybody, but there's some possibilities.
I like one of the things you said there, though, Joe, about because in my view of Calvinism, it doesn't even start with total depravity. You can set tulip aside. It starts with a version of God's sovereignty that leads to all the rest. And if you have a God who has to control every molecule in the universe to get his plans to happen, then that's the God you have. And you were kind of commenting on that too, Kai. You have your hero, your great God, powerful God. And then you borrow from that power psychologically. It's just a psychological truth that you're going to, when you adhere to something like that or any dogma, you borrow the power from it in a sense. And it feels like you get that from it. And then you're as powerful ultimately as God in a way. You're side by side with him in this battle to convince people and bring them into submission. So there's that angle too.
I like what you said earlier too, Doug, the simplifying of things. So pleasing God becomes really simple because no matter what you do, it pleases God. Because everything that happens is ordained and pleases God, at least for some.
Yeah, I see a layer under what Doug said. The like maybe a final layer. I think Doug gave almost the narrative structure there with saying that it might start from a version or a story, a narrative about God's sovereignty. And I think that that's rooted in, I think the real placeholder for that version of God's sovereignty is nihilism. I think it's a drive, a relentless drive for stagnant stasis, nothingness. And to see that there's a way in the world to generate a narrative, a normative form, and coach people but to borrow that nihilism and weaponize it is kind of crazy. When I think about it like that, when I boil Calvinism down to the very bottom that I can go down to, I see nihilism. That's what I see. A message of nothing has meaning. This is all void. And I don't see a way in their narrative structure at the very end, the logical end, where the logical end for them is, oh, well, it's all for God's glory. But that doesn't circulate through in a meaningful way, because I think that it stems from at the very bottom. It's nihilistic. That's what I think. So
like a two worlds mythology leaves you nihilistic, because if all the meaning takes place in the other realm, there's no meaning that you can generate here. And there's also no, like Joe was saying, the whole responsibility thing. If you have goals and you don't meet them, or if there's something right to do and you don't do it, you still have you have a prepackaged explanation for why that took place, which absolves you.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, it's really brings about God's glory for me not to do this great thing, not to put forth the effort.
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately must be what he decreed, because that's what happened.
I think the key insight to get to the nihilism conclusion is when Joe said that Calvinism is like the abdication of responsibility. If you remove responsibility, you remove meaning. And if you remove meaning, you are nihilistic. That's it.
I would add too that Calvinism's a proponent of mindlessness, because it's teaching people how to not think, that they don't have a mind worthy of examination. They aren't made in God's image as people who have rational minds. And I think that's a stepping stone to nihilism, because the nothingness of nihilism is got to be founded somewhere in a conviction that there's no epistemic truth, that there's nothing to lean on, and we're all mindless. And so I'm behind the pulpit telling you that I'm the only mind. You don't even need to have one.
Yeah, I think I see in what you just said, Doug, the contradictions, the many logical contradictions in Calvinism. You know, like God is just, and yet
he has to be the author of evil.
Yeah, and on and on.
Well,
so many. So you kind of have to throw your brain out the window. I mean, I don't want to say that.
To hold two contradictory things. I mean, they call it in 1984. They called it doublespeak.
Yeah, the appeal to mystery and an intention being used instead of
cover story for doublespeak. Yeah,
for logical contradiction. So if you, that how can you have meaning without logic?
I really want to jump on this comment that Doug said this real quick, and because I know we got other people with their hands raised, but Doug said, when you adhere to an ideology, you borrow the power from it. And then Nick said Calvinistic sovereignty. Yeah, you borrow the nihilism, weaponize it. So somebody in this whole idea that you borrow the power from the ideology, that is such a powerful statement to me. That's a quotable quote from tonight, in my opinion. And somebody in the comments, their name is Rose of Zion Wisdom. I think they were riffing off what you said, Doug, when they jokingly said in quotes, my faith in my sovereign God is so pure and perfect that a lot of that sovereignty is even rubbed off on me.
Yeah, there you go. That's great.
So,
That's eloquent.
so now if you're the pastor of a Calvinist church, you are the authoritative executor of God's sovereignty. You get to control people.
Basis of cults. It's the foundational basis of cults. You create
Yeah.
a mindlessness with one mind that drives everything, and you convince people that they can't think, and away you go. I look at Calvinism as a cult and a heresy, both.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's and just for anybody watching out there, that's not something that Doug would say lightly. Doug,
No, not at all.
You're
Not at
not
all.
like a sensation. You don't do things for the sake of sensationalism, you know.
No, and I don't pontificate and proclaim I've got a better dogma.
Right.
Just Calvinism is a house of cards. You really study it, and to me, and it breaks down pretty quickly. But I think people need to do their own study and come to their own conclusions. I mean, I don't expect to sound like I've got the mind and you don't. If you're a Calvinist, I'm not in the business of attacking Calvinism that way, but I'm in the business of trying to advocate for scriptural and biblical truth and who
Right.
God is and who he really is in his sovereignty. His sovereignty is amazing to me. He can do anything without controlling every molecule in the universe. But if you start there, you end up with all the conclusions that Calvinists end up with.
So let's go to we got about 15 minutes left. We got 3 hands up. Let's go to Susan and then Dan and CH.
You know, I'm kind of getting psychological here a little again, but I think it boils down to insecurity and immaturity. Because if you're afraid to ask questions, you just want to accept that, like Doug's saying, that mind, it just shows that you're just not secure, you know. And it makes me wonder also, are you really a Christian, you know? Because when you're secure in the Lord, you know, and you're accepted by him, you're accepted in the beloved, you don't, you know, that removes a lot of that fear and insecurity. And then I was thinking of that verse in Hebrews, let us consider how to stir up one another. And I think for us, we need to be careful that we don't, like Doug saying, I have all the answers, because we want to try to get these people back into the, you know, the fold, so to speak. And I think, you know, what you're doing, you know, with this is helpful. So, and a lot of others out there, you know, like Alana and Leighton, that are really trying to, you know, rid the church of this false incursion, you know.
Yeah, the Lord has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
whenever we have that fear driving us, there's an indicator that we're listening to the wrong thing or plugged
Right.
into the wrong, something like that, oriented in the wrong direction.
And when you know the Lord loves you, you're secure in him. You're not afraid to, you know, ask questions if there's something you see in scripture, it doesn't line up with what you're hearing. You're not afraid to ask. I mean, I've been a believer since I was 5, and, you know, I'm just saying, I feel like I really am a Christian. I'm not afraid to question, you know, beliefs.
Yeah, you'd have that spirit of curiosity because you want to know,
Yeah.
just like you would.
I want to really
Imagine
know
the
what.
curiosity you have when you meet a new potential romantic interest. I mean, you have all kinds of questions for them, and
Right.
that's the kind of approach that we should have toward God. And unfortunately, that gets stifled in a lot of people, and they think they got it all. But it's
Right.
that same kind of curiosity.
God in a
should
box,
always be
right? Got all figured out now. That's it. We're done.
Could I say,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, go ahead, Joe,
Wayne.
and then we got to get to Dan.
About curiosity. Okay, just real quick. The Bible mentions angels being curious, that which things the angels desire to look into.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to me, I wouldn't be surprised if God is curious too.
I'm going to, in lieu of this, I'm going to try and quote probably one of the top 5 things I've heard in the past year. And it was when Christopher Master Pietro said, when him and John Vervaeke were talking about three individuals, Socrates, Kierkegaard, and Christ, they came to the conclusion, or Chris came to the conclusion, that we are to use the inquiring eyes of Socrates in order to find Christ. So, yeah.
Wow.
That's good.
It was only through the eyes of Socrates can we find Christ.
Looking for that verse in Peter. There's a song by a cappella on the We Have Seen His Glory album called Angels Long to Look Into These Things. Which comes from that verse, 1 Peter 1:12. Dan.
Yeah, a couple of things. And nice to see you all, by the way.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Yeah,
Turn
always
on
good
my
to see you
subtitles
guys.
here.
You help me a lot. I really love the content. Opens my mind, and I find it so refreshing listening to you guys and the various videos that get put up, the effort that goes into putting them together. I really appreciate. I find so much of Christianity like chewing cardboard. It's just got no flavour. It's dull. It just gets monotonous, and I find that listening to the content here encourages me, inspires me, and I feel that that's for myself. I feel that's very necessary because I just burn out and other stuff, and I'll get bored. Well, the past couple of weeks, the videos and that, I kind of what I get from a lot of the Calvinist guys when I was watching the stuff with the two ladies that you had, and they was kind of saying, challenging the guys about the Calvinism, and their response was, no, it's not. It's almost like there was an elephant in the room, and they're saying that there's an elephant there, and their response is, no, I can't see an elephant. Can you see an elephant, John? No,
exactly.
elephants in here. But there's a whacking great elephant in the room, and it just almost seems a bit like they give themselves permission to be sociopathic. Kind of comes across like that to me, in the sense that it's like they believe that they're doing God's work, but to the rest of us, it's just like you're just abusing people. It's really horrible behaviour. What they did to them ladies, I thought was disgusting. And then I've noticed in the comments, like on the most recent video you did, like why Christians can't notice God, and there was a guy kind of put a great long tirade of a rant after. And it was kind of like he was, trying to pull it all back to the propositional stuff. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with propositions, is there? Obviously, right? The Bible's full of them. But it's kind of like, I thought you're just kind of missing the point of what your angle is, I think, in the sense that it's like, look, we know that, we got that bit, but we're trying to grow past that and find out how we can apply this to our lives to improve our lives. So for myself, I'm a tattooist, right? I could read books about tattooing all day long and look at all the best tattoo artists on the planet. Till I pick up a tattoo machine, I'm never going to learn to tattoo. And then once I do pick it up, I have trial and error. Like, I suppose you play a guitar or whatever, you don't just automatically become, Led Zeppelin's lead guitar or something, do you? There's a process you go through, which is, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. You're kind of learning, and you have people come into your life, people leave your life. And at the end of it, it's sort of like, you know how to do the thing, don't you? And you can become. And like, I sort of see like the thing we've got, a bit like if I said to you, you got to love my dad. It's like, well, you don't know my dad. So it's like, until you get to know my dad, and then, a year down the line of kind of meeting him and him showing you kindness or whatever, you might be able at the other end say, I really love your dad. I feel like I know your dad now. But to just keep barking at people that you've got to say this, and as long as you say this, then you know him, and everything's great. It's just words in the end, isn't it? And it can become very like, it's just not, there's nothing there, is there? It's just noise in the end. So, that was all really. Nice to see you.
Well, you always deliver when you talk, Dan. It's always interesting to Wow. Thanks for sharing that. CH. Is that what you go by?
It's Christopher.
Christopher. Okay. I know that name.
Yeah, just
Good to
love
see you.
hearing you guys. Yeah, you guys, man, it's been a great. Yeah, a lot of your videos are great, but the last few definitely have, I think, opened up some things inside of me. You know, I'm giving the Holy Spirit credit for that. Just, you know,
Yeah.
seeing things differently. Moving along here slowly. So what I was going to say, just real quick, to ping back on something that the power comment was very big tonight. And we were talking earlier about how I see you breaking down Calvinism, the reasons why people do this, and the experience I've had with a number of people. There is a range. The power comment really kind of sums up that stuff. For me, it's seeing chaos versus order to some degree, because I see creation as, you know, of God, and then I see evolution as something of man. Capitalism versus, you know, Marxism, socialism, like all these concepts, wokeism versus, you know, Christian charity. There just seems to be a long list of things that we experience in our society, and in the church, Calvinism seems to fit that bill too. Like what you speak about in your group, very, very freeing things in the spirit, and very, very edifying and elevating things to many, seems stifled and crushed by the practice and the psychological thinking of these Reformed and Calvinistic thinkers. So that's all I'd say tonight.
Yeah, repressed is a good by the Calvinistic thinking is yeah. And I agree that statement that Doug made about the power is that's wow.
When you think of a 5-year-old and your dad, you borrow your dad's power to feel safe and secure, and eventually you aren't 5 anymore. But Calvinism is kind of a 5-year-old power grab in a way too. Another way to look at it. It's very infantile schematic, in my opinion.
Wow. That's a qualified assessment right there.
Somewhat.
James, can you hear me, James? You got your hand
I
up?
can hear you. Thanks. Yeah. Well, it just create it. It allows a mindset of persuasivism, and this attitude that, you know, that we can bring people into it's not, but a trance, if you will, into a persuasiveness that we can have, you know, we can just manipulate them. We can manipulate their mindset. We can manipulate their thought structure. We can manipulate their behavior, their actions, to where it really takes away the authentic self. And it's, I don't think we realize how prevalent that is, because it doesn't just happen in religion. It can happen in just life.
To stifle people to the point where their own opinion and perspective is repressed, and they don't feel, not only do they not feel the freedom to voice it without being witch hunted, but it happens for so long and it's so effective that people forget that they have their own opinion. Like you could not ask what James White what he really thinks about a passage right now. He doesn't even know. He's outsourced his thinking for so long to the script that he doesn't even know. So like when you said it suppresses the authentic self. Yeah, you can't even get to know yourself at all.
No, because it's just. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I loved what you were saying there, Dan. I think it not only suffocates ideas, it eliminates personhood, so that you're not of any value really, because you contribute nothing. You don't have a genuine self that's in the game of of dialogue. You're not worth a whole lot. So I believe it really kind of oppresses not just your opinions, but your sense that you have a mind and have a personhood and have an identity, because you're not welcome at that table. With the identity is the one that knows it all, not
Correct.
you.
So
Yes.
the very vivid picture that came into my mind while you were talking about this type of person, this type of approach in personal interaction, that is, I'm going to corner you into some sort of logical contradiction and bend your thinking as to manipulate your very thoughts, your very behaviors and things like that. What I saw, the best example I could see of this, first of all, I think this is a perfect description of what Plato is calling or deeming a sophist. I think that is the goal of sophistry, is to borrow the power of nihilism and drive the inherent meaning-making power of an individual and drive it down into meaninglessness, which is where Doug is saying that it will extract your, it will suck out your individuality, your authentic self, like James is saying. And one of the vivid examples I've seen of this, which I have been totally disgusted by, is like Living Waters. You can watch Ray Comfort go up to people and enact live time sophistry. I don't know if anybody's ever seen any of his videos, but he's like, oh, I just want to, caringly and lovingly ask you a couple questions like Socrates would. So they're posing as the philosopher who would use inquiry in order to open up the possibility of what somebody might see. Like, questions are the very things that can break our mental frames and allow for new things to be seen and understood. And that's what Socrates does. But the sophist appears as the philosopher because they're asking questions, but they're asking leading questions. And you can watch Ray Comfort do this by asking somebody something like, well, have you ever lied before? Well, yes. Oh, have you ever looked at a woman in a lustful way? Oh, yes. So he has this whole script that he runs down, and it does exactly what James and Doug were just explicating in their own way, which was it literally sucks out the individual into a non-entity. And the only individual that you see is Ray Comfort. And the level of sophistry there under the guise of Christianity. And you'll even see him saying, I just love you so much. I care about you so much that I just wanted you to know this. And it's like, so now they're using the mask of the love of Jesus Christ in order to manipulate somebody into a nihilistic type of ideology. Is so disgusting to me that they would use the greatest face, the greatest individual who has ever lived, use his face and his language and his actions in order to do that to somebody. And it's very frustrating. But yeah, that's the picture I saw when James was talking there.
I wonder what the what do you call it? Not the turnover rate, but the attrition rate is, or the endurance rate is, for Ray Comfort converts that have happened that way, like converts that he's gotten that way. I wonder what the endurance rate of those converts are.
Not a single one would backslide. He calls his method the way of the master. He's God's champion. No one can contend with the methods that he's displaying there, right? No, yeah, Nick, I totally get what you were saying. It's tough to watch. You get some people like the Ray Comforts or really any pastor who is playing a power dynamic game, basically scripting what propositions must be spoken so that the individuals in earshot forget what their own voice sounds like. That is messed up. We're image bearers, uniquely gifted in fruits to edify the body, and we're not to speak. The only things we're supposed to say are this prescripted, approved language. It's like reading from the teleprompter of whatever the pastor is in front of the building. It's sorry, that's messed up.
The thickening aspect to all of that. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think that those kind of techniques occur. I'm not comfortable saying that those people are being brought to Christ, or that, or that they're being brought into Christianity. I'm not comfortable with that, and which makes me wonder how many professing Christians there are out there that just it's so, the Christianity that they're part of is so different from what Christ is, that I don't know.
I think there's some good news in all of this, because I see the body of Christ moving more towards, I'm involved in like micro churches and disciple making. And I think we're moving away from all that, kind of chicanery, like Seraphim said, all that kind of stuff. We're learning how to really make like this. That's what we're doing here. We're working on discipleship, not just making a convert so to get a notch under your belt, but really being apostles and of Christ and, doing the work. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
I'm trying to figure out how to stop obscuring the light. I know that my life has things that are holding back the light that I should be shining in the darkness. And I'm hoping that whatever positive growth comes in my life as a result of dispensing with unnecessary presuppositions and all the other nonsense, that it inspires, it grows contagious. Something about the light in my life inspires somebody else to say, yeah, where that the source is the only one, like not me, but the source of the light. That's the real McCoy. That's the thing that defines us all. Not all this garbage in the world and all that man-made systematic theology script junk. I'm done with all that.
Okay, Kevin, that's your cue to hold up the book.
Which one you want? I got about 14 of them up
He
here.
just mentioned systematic theology. Where is it now?
It's actually over there on the shelf right now. I got to get volume 2.
Dude, I'll bet you that Kevin's arm is like, I don't know, maybe like a centimeter bigger just from curling that book all the time.
Yeah.
I've got both of them in one volume, so it's even heavier.
He doesn't need the gym. He's got a
I try to even it out by waving the Bible with this arm, but the systematic theology book is thicker. So
you know what, Kyle? Kyle, I see that light in you. I see it. I'm sure you are that witness. And like that saying goes, tell them about Jesus, and sometimes use words that you don't need to. The light, I see the light in you. So You're doing it.
That's awesome. We're a few minutes over right now. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up, but I want to give anybody, if there's a last thought that you have to get out before we go.
Love you
Doug?
guys. Love you guys.
I love you, Doug.
I want to say to Nick back, I had a little bit of aporia, from the beginning, and I've kind of been stuck there looking at your triad. And I don't have a lot of clarity, like I'm working through it, but the question that was coming to my mind was, if you were to overlay growth and transformation, how would an individual navigate through this triad? Or what are the interactions there? That was kind of like where I don't necessarily think there was an answer to that maybe right off the bat, but as I kind of sat in what you were saying at the beginning, that's where kind of I grew curious.
Yeah.
That's a lot, so I didn't mean to throw that in at the end.
No. I'm gonna. You started off by saying it was a moment of aporia, so I'm gonna try and let it simmer and not respond, because I think with what I was trying to say, or what was trying to be said, I think that over the course of the video, I definitely got stuck too between two of the criteria and how the third overlaps or whatnot. I think it became a little bit more clear to me once Doug kind of invoked some Kantian language, or and stuff like that with the noumenal world. And then I have to reminisce through the conversation, everything too, but I did get a little bit of clarity on what I think might have been trying to be said there through the night. But yeah, I think, you know what I think it is at the end of the day? I think that Forrest Landry's principle of using triadic thinking rather than dichotomous thinking, like a this versus that, or a this and that, but using triadic thinking in the first place, like kind of looking for a third, is just insightful to begin with. So I think that moment of aporia is good and necessary, just so I could let it go, and if it re-enters and takes more form, more shape, in the future, which it might, at least I can rest on the fact that it emerged as a third. So there's always a checksum. There's always a way to break the rigid framing of a this versus that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that doing more of that kind of thinking, like looking for a third, is going to give insights no matter what the interpreter or the person perceiving is looking at. You know what I mean? So yeah.
So the visual that just came to mind is you're trying to surf and your timing might not be quite right. So you dove under this wave and now you're going to wait for the next one that's just right. And you're gonna find a way to engage that one.
Right.
I don't know. That's just the visual that came to my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's nice.
And hopefully the waves keep coming. All right, guys. Wow, it's been great, guys. It's been amazing.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, welcome aboard too. It's good to.
Thank you for letting me
Thank you, everyone.
dive in.
For the
All
wave.
right, folks. Peace out. We'll see you next time. Love you all.
Peace
and
out.
I appreciate everybody contributing. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Hope you all too.
Great
Blessings.
comments.